Welcome to another deep dive. And this one, well, it's a topic a lot of us can probably relate to, even if we don't always realize it. Trauma. You guys sent over excerpts from this book, Healing from Trauma, Reclaiming Your Life. Just the title, it hits you.
Yeah, it's powerful. And this book, it really gets into it, like what trauma actually IS, how to even know if you're dealing with it, and then the big one, how to start healing.
And that's what I'm so curious to dig into with you, because I don't know about you, but there are times I just feel off, and it's like nothing's wrong in my life, but something's lingering. This book kind of blew my mind by saying that could be trauma, like stuff from way back affecting us in ways we don't even realize.
Oh, absolutely. One of the first things they do is really break down what trauma is. Because a lot of us, we think, oh, something bad happened. But it's not just about the event itself, it's the impact, the emotional side of it. That's the real trauma.
Okay, so unpack that a little. So it's not enough that something bad happened, it's gotta be. How it made you feel that makes it trauma.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, they use words in here, fear, obviously, helplessness, even horror. These feelings, they stick around long after, whatever happened is over. Yeah. That's what this book's saying, is the trauma, that lingering impact.
So then it's not just in your head, it's like in your whole system.
Exactly. Mind, ADD, body, it can mess you up in both.
PTSD, everyone knows that one. But they get into stuff like trouble sleeping. Even chronic pain, they're saying, can be tied back to trauma. Chronic pain. Seriously, I never would have put those together.
It's all connected, right?
Yeah.
If your body's stuck in that fight or flight mode because of something that happened even years ago, it's like, imagine your car stuck in high gear all the time. Eventually, something's got to give.
Wow. Okay, that's an image. So we're saying trauma is way more than just like bad stuff happening, which honestly kind of scary, because if it's hiding out like that, how are we supposed to even know?
And that is the question. That's why being able to spot the signs is huge. And luckily, the book lays out a pretty clear framework for doing exactly that.
Okay, so break it down for us. What are some of those signs we should be looking out for?
Well, first off, you got to realize trauma shows up differently in everyone. Like one person might be, having emotional outbursts. Another person might just shut down completely. There's no one-size-fits-all checklist, which honestly makes it even trickier.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So if it's not as simple as do you have these symptoms? How are we supposed to know?
It's more about noticing patterns.
Yeah.
Right. And how you react to things, your emotions, all that. Like the book talks about this emotional roller coaster, intense mood swings, anger coming out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Or feeling nothing, like you're numb. All those can be trauma responses.
Okay, so internally, we've got this emotional stuff going on. What about outwardly? Does it show up in our relationships with people too? Because the book mentions that too.
Huge red flag. Trauma messes with your sense of safety, your trust. So making friends, keeping relationships healthy, it can be a minefield.
So we might see someone pushing people away, terrified of getting close. Or wait, isn't there the opposite too? Clinging on super tight because they're scared of being hurt again?
Bingo. It's about those extremes, right? Overreacting in a way. Because somewhere deep down, you're trying to protect yourself from more hurt based on that old trauma.
And this isn't just our personal lives either, right? The book talks about how it messes with work, school, all that.
Big time. Because here's the thing. Trauma takes up space in your brain. Imagine trying to do your taxes while someone's blasting a siren in your ear. Hard to focus, right? Same deal.
So that feeling of brain fog, or your mind's going a mile a minute, never stopping, that could be the trauma too.
Could be. And it's easy to miss, right? Because everyone's stressed, everyone gets anxious sometimes. But under it all, that old trauma could be driving it.
Man, I bet there are people listening right now who are having aha moments, connecting some dots they never did before.
And that's the first step, right? Just recognizing it, going, okay, maybe this thing that happened, it's still affecting me. That's huge. It really is. You've gone through something awful, but recognizing it's still got a hold on you, that's I don't know, the first bit of light in the darkness.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so we're starting to see the shape of this thing, how trauma is not always obvious, but then once you recognize it, what then? This book's called Healing from Trauma. Is that even possible?
That's the whole point, right? And this book, it's not just saying, it sucks. It actually lays out a roadmap for healing. And a big part of that, getting the right support.
Okay, so not going it alone. And they actually have a whole section on different types of therapy, which I thought was really cool. One that stuck out to me was EMDR. You ever heard of this? They use eye movements, literally moving your eyes back and forth to help process the trauma. Sounds kind of out there.
I know, right? But there's actually a lot of research behind it. Something about the bilateral stimulation, the back and forth. It's like it helps your brain reset how it's processing those old memories.
So almost like giving your brain a nudge in the right direction to heal itself.
Yeah, kind of like that. And they talk about other stuff too, like somatic experiencing.
Yeah.
That one's all about the body, how we hold on to trauma physically.
Yeah. Which makes sense when you think about how, like you were saying earlier, trauma is not just in our heads. It's like our whole system gets out of whack.
Exactly. And what I appreciate is the book acknowledges therapy is not always easy to access. So they talk about other things too. Support groups, online communities, even just giving yourself permission to start working through stuff on your own with their guidance, of course.
Right. Like even just having the book is a starting point.
Totally. Because healing shouldn't be this exclusive club, right?
Hey.
Everyone deserves a shot at feeling better.
Okay, so we've got these different approaches, but then there's another thing they talk about that I think is huge E for a lot of people.
Huh.
Chronic trauma. So not just one event, but something ongoing like abuse or living in a really tough environment. That's got to be a whole other level.
Absolutely. It's insidious, right? Because if something bad happens once, you can point to it.
Yeah.
But when it's your normal, how do you even start to untangle that?
And they don't sugarcoat it either, like the impact that chronic trauma can have on your health, your relationships, everything.
Right. So imagine living with the threat of an earthquake every single day. Your body's always on edge, and eventually that takes its toll.
So it's even more important, I'd imagine, to get help, to talk about it. Because if it's your normal, you might not even realize how bad it is.
Which is why I'm so glad they dedicated a whole section to it. Because sometimes just having a name for what you're going through, that's the first step to breaking free.
It's like, oh, this is why I feel this way. Not to get all diagnosis happy, but sometimes knowing there's a reason for your struggles, that can be weirdly freeing.
Totally. It's not about labeling yourself. It's about understanding yourself better, right? So you can start to heal.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of heavy stuff. What trauma, IS, the signs, different therapies, even this chronic trauma thing. But I feel like there's this whole other side of the book that's actually really hopeful, and it's this idea of resilience. Like, yeah, trauma sucks, but then what comes after? Can you actually bounce back from that?
That's the $1,000,000 question, right?
Yeah.
And what I love is this book doesn't shy away from it. They're saying, yes, resilience is possible, but it takes work.
So it's not like you read the book and poof, you're magically resilient.
Would that be nice? No, it's more like they give you the tools, the knowledge to start building that resilience muscle. It's about creating healthy habits, learning from the tough times, all that.
So moving from like just surviving to actually thriving, which, okay, I know that sounds kind of cheesy, but isn't that kind of the goal? To not just get through it, but to actually come out the other side stronger.
Exactly. And one thing they emphasize that really resonated with me is this idea of progress over perfection. Because let's face it, healing from trauma, it ain't a straight line.
Oh, tell me about it. There are days when I'm like, I got this, and then bam, something small will trigger me and I'm back to square one.
Exactly. And this book, it's like it gives you permission to be right where you are in your journey. It's not about judging yourself for not being over it by now. It's about celebrating the small wins, you know?
Yeah, like, hey, I recognize that trigger. Even if I didn't handle it perfectly, that's still something.
Exactly. It's about being kind to yourself, knowing that healing takes time.
Okay, so the book's giving us hope, which is huge. But beyond that, what I'm hearing is it's giving us tools, like practical things we can do to start feeling better.
Oh, 100%. And one of the things they talk about that I think is so valuable is coping strategies for those moments when you're really struggling. Like in the heat of the moment, what can you do to calm down, to feel safe again?
Yeah, because sometimes it's like this wave of panic just washes over you and you're like, I don't even know what to do with myself.
Exactly. And that's where having those go-to tools is so clutch. They talk about things like grounding techniques, where you're basically bringing yourself back into your body, into the present moment, deep breathing exercises, stuff like that.
Okay, so simple stuff, but like in those moments of panic, sometimes the simplest things are the hardest to remember.
Totally. But having them written down somewhere, it's like having a cheat sheet for your nervous system. And they even talk about this thing called progressive muscle relaxation, which, I'll be honest, I was skeptical at first.
Okay, what is it?
So you basically go through your body and you tense up different muscle groups, hold it for a few seconds, and then release. It sounds kind of weird, but apparently it helps to kind of reset your nervous system.
Huh, interesting. It's like tricking your body into relaxing.
Exactly. Because when we're talking about trauma, a lot of times it's like our nervous system's stuck on high alert. So these techniques, they're like a way to tell your body, hey, we're safe now. You can stand down.
Which, I don't know about you, but I need to hear that sometimes.
We all do. And it's not just about managing those immediate, crisis moments. They also talk a lot about the power of creative expression as a way to process trauma over the long term.
Okay, so like journaling, art, music, all that.
Exactly. Because sometimes words just aren't enough, you know? But through art, through music, you can start to tap into those feelings, those experiences that might be too painful to access directly.
It's like giving yourself permission to feel it all, but in a safe, contained way.
Yes. And there's actually a ton of research showing how these forms of creative expression can help to reduce stress, process emotions, even build resilience.
So it's not just some woo-woo, let's get in touch with our feelings thing. It's actually backed by science.
Exactly. And speaking of things that are backed by science, one more thing I wanted to touch on because it's so crucial to healing, social support.
Okay, yeah, the book talks about that too, about how isolating trauma can be.
It can make you feel like you're the only one going through it, like no one else could possibly understand. And that loneliness, it just compounds the pain.
Which is why I'm guessing there's such big advocates for finding your people, your tribe, whatever you want to call it.
100%.
Yeah.
Because when you connect with others who've been through similar experiences, it's like this wave of validation washes over you. Suddenly, you're not alone in the darkness anymore.
Yeah, it normalizes it, right? Like, oh, this thing that happened to me, it's not me, it's just something that happens.
Exactly. And they're not just talking about, venting to your friends either, although that's important too. They talk about support groups, online communities, even just the simple act of reaching out to someone you trust and saying, hey, I'm struggling.
Because sometimes just having someone to listen without judgment, that's all it takes to start feeling a little lighter. And it's funny, right? Because we think we have to go through tough stuff alone, like to be strong or something. But this book's saying, no, actually, reaching OUT is the strong move.
100%. Because healing, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. We need those connections, that support, to really heal and grow.
And it's a journey, right? That's something else they emphasize. It's not like you read the book, you have a good cry, and then poof, everything's fixed.
So I wish, no, it's messy. It takes time. And I think that's something we don't give ourselves enough grace for. We expect to just get over it. And when we don't, we beat ourselves up.
Oh, yeah, the shoulds, right. I should be over this by now. I should be handling it better. It's like we put all this pressure on ourselves on top of everything else.
Exactly. And this book, it kind of gives you permission to just be where you are in the process. It's okay if you're not thriving every single day. Some days, just surviving, that's a win.
Totally. And I love that they talk about progress over perfection because it's so key with this stuff. It's not about never feeling triggered again or never having a bad day. It's about, like you said, just keep moving forward.
Little by little, one step at a time. And some days those steps might feel tiny, but hey, you're still moving, right?
Exactly. Okay, so we've talked about what trauma is, how to recognize it, all sorts of different ways to start healing. But if you had to boil it all down, what's the one thing you really want our listener to walk away with today?
I think. Just knowing that you're not alone.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this and you're relating to any of this stuff, there's no shame in it. And more importantly, there's hope. Healing is possible. You don't have to live with this forever.
That's so powerful. And this book, honestly, it's like a lifeline. It gives you the tools, the knowledge, the permission to start healing.
It really does. And I think sometimes that's all we need, Just that little spark of hope to remind us that things can get better. That we can get better.
Absolutely. And on that note, a huge thank you to everyone for joining us on this deep dive. It's been, heavy at times, but ultimately I think really hopeful. And remember, you're not alone on this journey.